Hi everyone, and welcome to the Styling XML lecture. In this lecture, we're going to go through the process of learning how to style XML using CSS and how to style XML using XSLT. XSLT is what allows us to tell the browser, hey, we want you to display this XML in a particular way that is a little bit more appealing than kind of that general tree structure that we get without adding any style to our XML. XSL is similar to the way that we use CSS to style HTML, but it works particularly well for XML, which is why we use it. When we're styling XML, we always start with our original XML file. So if you're thinking like, oh, I need to style my XML, the first thing you need to do is create the XML file, right? So as you can see here, here's an example from this website that I've included here, which walks you through the process of adding XSLT in order to display your XML data. So we've got our regular XML file, we've got our declaration here, we have the root element and then elements within the root element. So it's this nice regular tree structure that we would expect with an XML file, right? And let's say, for example, that we want to use CSS to style that file. In order to do that, we would have, within our XML file, we would include a link to the CSS style sheet in much the same way that we would for an HTML file. So very similar, right? And this is the syntax that you would use. Again, this is your XML style sheet, and in this case, the type is text/CSS, and then you have the link to the actual file, which in this case is tutorial.css. And then you can see over here on the right-hand side that we have our CSS syntax, and then down here in the bottom left, this is what our browser window would display to us when we apply that CSS to the original XML file that I showed you. If we want to style XML with XSL, it's fairly similar. It's just the language is a little bit different. So the cool thing is that we can use XSLT to integrate HTML and XSL. And then, of course, as we know, the HTML helps with styling things, right? So having all those different labels and being able to select them using XSL is really valuable, because with XSL, we can say, hey, you know, we're going to select particular areas based on the criteria that we're establishing, and then use that criteria to determine how we style different sections of an XML document. The other cool thing is that XSL supports if, when, and similar statements. So you can do a lot more with it than you can with CSS, which is much stricter in the way that you can apply style. So let's say you want to use XSL to transform XML. Much like CSS, you would need to refer to your XSL file in your XML document, and to do that, you would refer to the link for the file name, just like you would normally, and then you would have XML style sheet type, and so again, following that very similar format that we're already familiar with. You also have the XSL : syntax, which is part of XML, and the other thing to note is that you might refer to many different namespaces in the same document, and so just be aware of that. When we're using XSL, we have a separate XSL document, right? And so to do that, you would need to add a new XML namespace. So in this case, we're calling it the XSL style sheet, right? So and then from there, you would, oops, that's wrong. Hi everyone, and welcome to the lecture on styling XML. Our learning objectives today are to focus on understanding more about styling XML using CSS and styling XML using XSLT. So XSLT stands for Extensible Style Sheet Language Transformations. And essentially what this does is it allows you to apply style to an XML file in much the same way that we would use CSS and apply that to HTML. So we're saying, hey, please take this XML file and display it in a way that is pleasing when I open it up in a web browser. When we're styling XML, we start out with the original XML file. So as you can see here, we've got an example file right here that I pulled from this website, which has a very nice tutorial on implementing XSLT in order to display XML data. And we're following all of the XML requirements. We have our declaration, we have our root elements, and so on. And this is what you want to start with. You want to make sure that your XML file is well formed when you begin thinking about how to apply style. If we want to use CSS to style our XML, just note that it can be done, but we have limited results, right? Because there's no way for us to include HTML tags at this point without using XSLT. And so what CSS does here is a little bit more limited, but you can still make it look better in a browser. So as you can see here, we've started with our XML file, and we're linking to an external CSS style sheet, as you can see with the syntax right here. And then I've got that syntax on the right-hand side of the page, again from this tutorial site. And then as you can see in the bottom part of the page here, this is what our syntax from that original XML file would look like. So it does look a lot better than just having that list on the page. When we style XML with XSL, it's great because it allows us to integrate both HTML and XSL, as you'll see, which, of course, as we know, HTML is helpful for really divvying up our content and helping us style things. And the way XSL works, which we're not going to get into in depth in this class, is that it allows us to select different sections based on the criteria that we establish, and it also supports if, when, and similar statements, which is really great for being able to again specify different sections of content a little bit more clearly. When we use XSL to transform XML and to make it viewable, we need to refer to that XSL file in our XML document. Again, in much the same way that we would do if we had an HTML file and we were referring to our CSS style sheet, right? So we would use this language here, and that will allow us to refer to our external style sheet. When we use XSL to transform XML, we also have to have our XSLT file extension document, right? And one thing to note is that sort of the default namespace is HTML, but to address that, we need to tell the browser, hey, we're using a different XML namespace here it's called XSL. And so you can see right here that we've got that language included. And you would just want to include that in any XSLT document that you're creating. So for the XML file, just to show you what that looks like, we have our declaration, then we have the style sheet type, which actually this should be XSLT, not XSL, and then we have the rest of our XML file. Just to show you a little bit for what this looks like, this is, again, the example from your assignment, right, from the tech equipment. Over here on the left, we have our XSLT style sheet, and you can see that we're using both HTML and XSL, and this file is linked to our original XML document for the tech equipment, right? And so we have body, we have this statement XSL for each select, so we're saying for each instance of tech equipment /computer. please change the style for me, right? And so it goes through this entire page and for each item, and as you can see, we continue to use XSL in a variety of areas, right? So anytime we're saying please use XSL, then we use these tags that say XSL colon for each or XSL value of. And again, W3 Schools goes through most of these, but if you have questions, you can definitely reach out, and you're going to be using the template anyway. So, yeah, this is what that would look like over here on the right-hand side, and that's how you would implement XSLT with your XML file in order to, again, change what that formatting looks like. There are a few downsides to XSLT. It can be tricky to write if you don't know something similar like HTML, like CSS, and a little bit of programming. But oh wait, you know these things because we've spent time on all of these throughout this class. So it's kind of exciting to be able to implement all the skills you've built on in a new way. XML summed up, it allows us to create our own ways of organizing data. It's pretty flexible. Maybe you want to organize your items by author instead of book. You can do that. XML allows you to do that. Document type definitions and schemas allow us to create standards for our organizations that others can follow. And, we see that again with things like VRA. For example, we're following sets of standards in the way that we're describing resources using XML. And XSLT finally allows you to transform your XML into something that's much more appealing in the web browser. All right, that's it. So there is a brief video walking you through one other example that would be relevant for working on your homework. So definitely check that out. But otherwise, that's it for lectures.